We're living in a world today that wants to impose human rules on God's house. And you are seeing the repercussions when little old puny men wants to impose our rules on the king. There's going to be disruption in the house on every issue of life. You want to ask the question, oh king, what's your rule in this house? Your kingdom come, verse 10. Your kingdom come. Now, if you've been here for any amount of time, the word kingdom is probably driving you nuts because we kingdomize everything. God's concern, the whole Bible only has one subject, the glory of God through the advancement of his kingdom. He talks about it a million different ways. But that's the only subject in the Bible, his kingdom. The Greek word basileia, kingdom, means rule or authority. And so he says, when you pray to your daddy, you pray that his kingdom comes. That is, that heaven enters history. Because he's your father in heaven, and you're praying for the kingdom. His sphere of rule is being made manifest on earth. Now, don't miss this, because you have to understand that since kingdom means rule, he wants to be in charge. He wants to be in charge of your life. He wants to be in charge of your program. He wants to be in charge of your finances. He wants to be in charge of your decisions. He wants to be in charge of your relationships. He wants to be in charge because he wants to manifest his kingdom, his rule. When you come into my house on an earthly standpoint, or I come into your house, we are coming into each other's kingdom. I mean, men will say in a moment, I'm king of my castle. They be lying, but they be talking. But you come into my realm, my sphere of rule. Now, once I come into your house or you come into my house, there is an obligation to follow your rules. Amen. I mean, because it's your house. So in my house, I don't have ashtrays, so you can't smoke. I don't have liquor glasses, so Jack Daniels is unwelcome. And Hennessy must stay outside. If you come into my house, I'm going to correct you if you use profanity. I don't allow profanity in my house. Okay? If you come into my house with your boo, you're going to be sleeping in 2 separate rooms if I let you stay over. Now, you might say, but that's not how I roll. But you ain't in your house. You in my house. And once you come into my kingdom, my rules rule. Now, the problem is the whole world is God's house. The earth is the Lord's, the fullness thereof, the world and all they that dwell in it. He said, it's my house. So I set the rules. And your job is to adjust to my rules, which may not be your rules. It may not be how you were raised. It may not be how you feel. It may not be what you think. It may not be what they taught you in school, but this is my crib. And so you are to pray when you pray that my rule becomes manifested, thy kingdom come. One of the reasons we don't see more of God is we're trying to impose our kingdom on him. You all know what this is when you have teenagers who want to build their own kingdom in your house. They want to set up their rules while they eat your food. I told y'all about Crystal. She's shaking her head. No, but I got to tell you, because one of the reasons God gives preachers kids is for illustrations. So Crystal's the intellectual one in the family, and she's kind of the Smart one. Oh, excuse me. Now, I didn't mean that Priscilla. But she's kind of, she's the intellectual one. And so one day she's arguing with me. She's getting a little sedity. She's getting a little disagreement. And then, so in the midst of the disagreement, she decides to walk off. Hello. She decides to walk off. So I'm saying, where you going? She said, to my room. That needed some correction. She's going to my room. I let her sleep in. Because it's my house. But some of you parents know what it is when teenagers want to set up their own kingdom in your house and ain't paying bill number one. We're living in a world today that wants to impose human rules on God's house. And you are seeing the repercussions of what happens when little old puny mankind wants to impose our rules on the king. There's going to be disruption in the house. So your question is, on every issue of life, the kingdom agenda is the visible demonstration of the comprehensive rule of God over every area of life. You want to ask the question, oh king, what's your rule in this house? This is your house. And our prayer to Daddy is that your kingdom comes. That you be made visible, your rule will be made visible. You enter the kingdom through conversion. You experience the kingdom through surrender. When you accept Christ, you enter the kingdom. When you come under his authority, then you get to experience the kingdom. So many Christians don't experience the kingdom because they entered it but haven't surrendered to it. And if there's not the surrender, you can be a rebellious kid in the house or a rebellious culture in the house. Now, I will agree, there is an adjustment to this house. Different strokes. Arnold and Willis, two kids from Harlem, had now been brought into the house of Philip Drummond. Philip Drummond is living large. They're from the hood. Now they're in a new kingdom because they're in Drummond's house. But they brought their hood with them. So we laughed when we watched Different Strokes as Mr. Drummond is trying to make them sedity and sophisticated, and they're bringing their old ways with them, and they have to go through this adjustment to their new location. When you came to Christ, you entered into another house, but we bring our old stuff with us. And so God often has to bring things in our lives to let us know that's not accepted in his house. Thy kingdom come. The rule of God is the cry. That is his program, and it demands a priority because he says, thy will be done. So there is a paternity, the Father, there is the program, the kingdom, and then there is the priority, his will. That's a hard one. Merging onto the highway of God is a problem. We all know what it is to merge onto a highway, and sometimes it's easy and sometimes it's hard to merge onto a highway, to get onto the route where things are going. God is going for his kingdom, and to do that, there must be the priority of his will. That's why he says, seek ye first the kingdom of God in Matthew 6:33. The idea is to merge onto where he is going. Now, let me remind you that there are two categories of will. There is the conditional will of God, and there is the unconditional will of God. The unconditional will of God is what he's going to do regardless. Amen. Regardless of whether you pray or not, regardless of whether you obey or not, regardless of anything. He's decided to make a sovereign decision to do something. In other words, no conditions are attached to it. He just says, this is what I'm going to do. That's tough when what you're asking him to do is not what you're praying for. Not what you're asking for, not what you're desiring, not what you're wishing, not what you're fasting for. This unconditional sovereign will of God. But then there is the conditional will of God. These are the things God will only do if you meet the conditions, which typically boil down to prayer and obedience. If the conditions are not met and it's his conditional will, then he won't do it, although he would have done it. James 4:2 says, you have not because you ask not. So you didn't pray about it. You didn't pursue in prayer about it. I was going to do it. You know, there is over $1 billion of gift cards that go unused every year. Over $1 billion of gift cards that go unused. How many prayers have gone unanswered because we didn't cash in? There is the conditional will of God, where when you meet the conditions, he responds in his own way, in his own time, but he responds because you've met the conditions. If it's the unconditional will, he's going to do it because he's made a sovereign decision, like it or not, that this is what is his desire for whatever this situation is. So I will be honest with you personally, and I want you to be aware of this, that the sovereign, unconditional will of God sometimes hurts. The sovereign, unconditional will of God sometimes hurts, particularly when he doesn't bother to explain it. The Bible is full of things that God has done that he didn't. He never explained to Job why his life was turned upside down in 24 hours. He never told him. Job ends the book with him knowing nothing about what happened in chapter 1. Something was happening up there that he had no knowledge of, because God, in an unconditional decision that he will only have to explain in eternity, I decided this now for this reason, and I decided not to tell you. But we shouldn't be that surprised, because all of us as parents do that with our kids. Amen. Make decisions that we don't bother to explain, and all we say is, because I said so. Because I said so. That is his unconditional will. But there is his conditional will. You say, but how do I know the difference? You don't. That's why the Bible says pray about all things. Because you don't know which ones are conditional or unconditional unless it's expressly stated. You don't know, so you pray about all things. That's why Paul can say in 1 Thessalonians 5:17, pray without ceasing, because he says bring everything to God. Because you don't always know which one is which. Ephesians 1, verses 10 and 11, God says he does all things after the counsel of his will. His goal is to get his will done. Now, he can do it with you or without you. God will always reach his goal. The question is, will you be a participating party in him getting there? Because he can skip you and go to somebody else. God is never locked down to you or me. So that's why you can never become prideful. You know, you can be blessed, but you better not be sadiddy with it. Okay? Nebuchadnezzar said, this is the great Babylon Which if you ever hear me say, this is the great oak cliff, and the word I come after that, stop me before I go crazy, okay? You never become prideful, because then you join the devil in his prideful rebellion against God, thinking of yourself more than you ought to think. That affects not only how we relate to God, but how you relate to other people. You're not better, you may just have more. So God is after his will. He wants us to give him the keys to the car of our lives. Because like a drunk driver, we stagger with our lives and our decisions. We stagger. We stagger. We think we're going right, but we're going left. And we stagger. So we need somebody behind the wheel of the car of our lives that knows where he's going. So there is the paternity. He's your daddy. There is the program, his rule. There is the priority. He wants to do his will. But the Lord's Prayer is divided into two halves. Those first things have to do with God. His name, his program, his priority. But now he switches to us. Because the next three things have to do with us. So he's not forgotten you. He just wants you and me to be in our proper place after him. So paternity, program, priority, now he comes to provision. Verse 11, give us this day our daily bread. Or to put it another way, as you've heard me say a million times, only God is your source. One source on all matters. Only God, your Father, is your source. Everything else is a resource, is a means that God uses. And he can change resources. The beautiful thing about that is that means that nobody can own you. Nobody can own you because nobody is your source. God can replace things, people, times, changes, circumstances. He can do it suddenly. He can do it gradually. So only God is your source. God is so comprehensive in his sourcing that he even uses bad things to accomplish his good will. He uses the devil to accomplish his will. He uses the sin of other people to accomplish his will. He took an unclean bird to feed the prophet, Elijah. All through the Bible, God is using things that are for him and using things that are against him because he's going to get where he wants to go, even if he has to use bad to get there. But he is your provider. Notice the word daily is twice in this verse. He says, give us this day our daily bread. That's physical provision. Give us this day our daily bread. Your daddy wants to be so involved with your life that he wants to be involved in your life on a day-by-day basis. Not a week-by-week Sunday morning worship scenario. He says it twice. This is, I want your daily dependence on me. That's why he fed Israel in the wilderness with manna day by day. Why? To keep them dependent. See, the problem, the blessing in America is that we have a lot. The blessing, the curse in America is that we have a lot. Because most of us don't have to think about daily bread because we got weekly and monthly freezers. And when you got weekly and monthly freezers, you don't think about daily bread because you already know you got the bread for today, tomorrow, next week. You got it. You got the grocery store up the street, when you could afford it. So we don't think about daily dependence until something goes wrong. Until something goes wrong, then all of a sudden, God is real important now. Because I need him today. He wants that to be a habit.